Hey guys, today we're talking about the excretory system and a nitrogenous waste. We're going to start off defining what a nitrogenous waste is and what are different forms of it that are produced by various living things. And then we'll get into the human excretory system and talk about how to make some pee. This lecture is a little bit different because I don't have all of the notes written down word for word. So I will be verbally explaining things, maybe showing you, pointing a few things out in the diagram. But because I'm not writing everything and I'm not typing everything, you may need to pause it and rewind so that you can listen to some of the details again. So the first picture that I have on page 21 shows proteins and nucleic acids, and these are things that organisms would consume in their regular diet because most things that they eat are going to have both of those organic molecules in them. Well, when those molecules are broken down to be used for energy or converted to something else, enzymes will remove the nitrogen as some form of ammonia. So the nitrogen gets taken out of those substances and gets reorganized into the body. Now, there are three different things it could get organized into. It could become ammonia, which is really toxic. It could become urea, which is one of the things that our body makes, and it's less toxic than ammonia, but still not good to keep around. Or it could be uric acid, which is the least toxic of the three options. So let's start with ammonia. Ammonia is so toxic that it has to be diluted in order to be safe in the environment. And that's why most aquatic animals are the ones that are going to produce ammonia because they're in water all the time. That as they secrete ammonia into the water, it gets diluted very fast in their surroundings. Yes, it's toxic, but it can only be tolerated in very low concentrations. So you have a little bit of it, and you add a lot of water to it, then it's not as bad. The organism that would produce ammonia needs access to a lot of water, which makes sense why a fish might be an organism that could stand being in the presence of ammonia because it gets diluted really quickly in the water that it's swimming in. As it leaves the body, it does so by simply diffusing into the surrounding water that they're in, so it doesn't have to leave through a specific transport protein or a specific channel. It will diffuse into the water they're in. Fish can lose the ammonia across their gills. And the benefit to having ammonia being your nitrogenous waste is that you don't have to waste a lot of energy making it because it's the natural byproduct of breaking apart and using the proteins and the nucleotides. It naturally forms pretty easily, forms ammonia. So not a lot of energy, not a lot of ATP was spent making it. You just got to make sure you got an easy way and a way to dilute it, to get rid of it. Now, urea is something that a mammal makes as a nitrogenous waste. It is something that's produced in the liver. It's a combination of ammonia and carbon dioxide. The body of a mammal we don't have enough water. We don't make enough continuous supply of water to handle pure ammonia, which is why our body has changed it so that we add some carbon dioxide to it. We change the format of it, and it's in a less toxic solution. So urea has a very low toxicity, there's less water required, and it's safe enough to move through your blood. So every cell in the body can make urea, and we got to get it out somehow, and I'll talk about that later, but it does eventually make its way to your urine. But to get to your kidneys, it has to go all through your body. So it's not harmful in the sense that it can't travel through your body. Your body makes it such that it's safe enough to go through your blood, but we still don't want to keep it in there. The disadvantage of having to make urea as your nitrogenous waste is that your body uses a ton of energy to do this. So we're wasting a lot of ATP converting the ammonia into urea, but we wouldn't survive if we had to deal with just ammonia. So it's a necessary thing for life. The third type of nitrogenous waste is the uric acid. It is, like I said before, the least toxic of the three options, and even less water is required. Birds are a great example of something that produces uric acid. Bird droppings, guano are examples of substances that are very rich in uric acid. The droppings in the guano have proven to be really good fertilizers, so this uric acid does help, when you return it to the soil, it's very, very beneficial for plants. And the good thing about making uric acid is that it costs even less energy than urea to make. I'm sorry, opposite. It needs even more energy than urea to make. So you make even more ATP to make the uric acid, but it is the safest of the three options. Over on the next page, we have a diagram that shows the very basic steps of making urine. I will later in the notes get to something a little more complex and something very specific to a human body, but these are the four general steps. So what we have here is blood coming in. It comes into this structure here, which is called the Bowman's capsule, and you'll see another picture of that in a minute. But what's happening here is filtration. So as the blood comes in, and it comes in with a lot of force, it's going to force its way in here, and then the blood pressure will force extra water and solutes across this membrane. And when those things come across, it's going to enter into this tubule. So this is the filtrate. This is the stuff that's being filtered out of the blood. The stuff that remains in the blood is going to continue through the capillary. Now, the filtrate might have some valuable substances in it that has to get put back into the blood. And if that's the case, that's what will happen at this reabsorption point. So maybe extra water needs to go back into the blood, so it will diffuse back into that capillary. It's also possible that the blood may have some things still in it that it needs to get rid of. It might have some toxins. It might have some extra ions that are needed, you need to get rid of. So that's going to be extracted back from the blood and added to the filtrate, which is going to make up the substance we call urine. And the last step here, excretion, is simply when urine is going to leave the body. This is a picture of the basic overall big picture view of your excretory system. The kidney is the main function of your excretory system, and this is, to put it plain and simple, it filters your blood. The kidney is connected to what's called a ureter, and the ureter will collect all of that filtrate, collect all of that urine that is made from the stuff that comes out of the blood. The bladder is where all the urine is stored, and the urethra is a little tube coming from the bladder, and that's how urine is going to exit the body. Now, from that big overall picture, if we zoom in and look at the kidney and then cut the kidney in half and look at it as a cross section, we can see some more details. We're seeing some arteries, renal artery, renal vein. Anytime you see the word renal, I need you to think kidney. Just like pulmonary, you think lungs. Now, renal, you think kidney. We have some different sections of the kidney here that are already labeled for us. We have the renal cortex, which is the outer section, and we have the renal medulla, which is the inner section, looks a little thicker than the cortex. And I'm going to zoom in on those in a minute so you can see what they look like. But this renal artery here is important because that's how blood is being brought into the kidney, and it's actually going to supply the cortex and the medulla with blood, and that's where all the filtering is going to take place. The cortex and the medulla, these two sections, and they go all the way around. They're not just where it's labeled, but they go all the way around. They have 1,000,000 nephrons in them. A million nephrons in one kidney. So if you have two good, healthy, functioning kidneys, you have 200 nephrons all working at the same time, trying to filter out your blood as fast as they possibly can. So let's take a look at a closer view of a nephron. So we would zoom into a section of that kidney, and here's the cortex, and here's the medulla. And then we have two different types of nephrons. The cortical nephron, you'll see it's mostly in the cortex it's mostly in the renal cortex of the kidney. And then the juxtamedullary nephron digs deeper into the medulla. Now the biggest difference here is that the nephron that's digging into the medulla, this nephron helps to produce urine that is more hypertonic or hyperosmotic, which means there's more solute in it and less water. So that's what this nephron specializes in, making the urine more heavy in solute and less water. This is a good adaptation to have if you're a mammal and you live on land, because it helps to conserve water in your body. So it helps to keeping a lot of that water back in you, because you're not surrounded by water all the time. Now, if we dig a little further and we get even more detailed, zoomed in view, this is one nephron. And there are 1,000,000 of these in one of your kidneys, but this is just one. So I have some specific details here, and I'm going to put stars next to the things that you absolutely must know. You must know what a glomerulus is. The Bowman's capsule is important. Proximal tubule, the loop of Henle, and where's the other one? Oh, the distal tubule. Those are the structures that you really, really must know. Okay, so here's how this works. The pressure that will force the blood into the glomerulus. So the blood will come through this artery. Okay, it's red, so it's leaving the heart, coming into this structure. As the blood moves into this glomerulus, the pressure of the blood pushes it into the Bowman's capsule. Okay, this structure right here, and that's where things are going to start to get filtered out. So the glomerulus is this ball structure. The Bowman's capsule is this end of it over here, and the blood will charge into that Bowman's capsule, and the material will get filtered out. The filtrate is going to travel through this proximal tubule. It's going to go all the way down here. It's going to go all the way down the loop of Henle, and as it comes back up the ascending limb, then it's going to finally leave through the distal tubule and then join this big collecting duct. And this collecting duct, which there's many of them, but that's going to bring everything to the ureter, which then leads to the bladder. So this collecting duct is basically collecting all of the little amounts of urine that are made in all of the nephrons. This is very twisty and turny, and it's not a straight line, and there's a good reason for that. There's adding lots of surface area here, and by adding lots of surface area, there are lots of moments and opportunities for things to diffuse either back in to this tube or to come out of the tube. This structure here that's going around the loop of Henle, the vasa recta, this is a fancy name for a capillary. It's a capillary that you will find in the renal medulla of the kidney. And it's an area for diffusion. So things might diffuse back out of the loop of Henle, or it might diffuse from the capillaries back into the loop of Henle. So up here in the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus, that's the main point of filtration. But as it travels through all of here, there's so many opportunities for things to diffuse in and out of it. It's not done. It's not really a done deal when it gets filtered this first time, because it might need to reabsorb, or you might need to extract things to get back into the loop of Henle or into the distal tubule. And as we go to our last page here, this is showing us all of the stuff that makes up a filtrate. So what makes up the urine? Water. different kinds of salts, and we see the salts in this picture. When we see NaCl, that's going to be one of our salts. Hydrogen ions, we have urea that we talked about before, glucose. It could be any kind of drugs that you may have taken, whether it be prescription or Advil or Tylenol or cold medicine. That's going to be in here as well, along with amino acids. Okay, so these are all things that are possible filtrates that would be taken out and added to the urine. This is a nice picture because it shows where active transport is happening and where passive transport is happening. So you'll notice that anywhere where water is moving, that's passive transport. It's going from a high water potential to a low water potential. The other thing to keep in mind is that as substances move through this structure of the nephron, things are always going back and forth. The filtrate is actually losing water as it continues to move. So here's we're losing water, here we're losing water, and here we're losing water. So as water is being lost throughout the nephron and up until even the collecting duct, the filtrate is becoming more concentrated. It's becoming less water and more solute as it goes, and that's what you want, because you want that water back in your body, because you don't live in water. You're a mammal. You need to keep a lot of the water that you have. In the outer medulla, there are aquaporin proteins that help make this tube very permeable to water and make it very easy for water to diffuse out of the tube and into the medulla. And we know that water moves from a high to a low very easily. And just note where other structures are moving in or moving out of this nephron. So this is a nice picture because it shows where molecules are moving, and it's a nice continuation of the picture that came before it. So here's the excretory system, and I hope this helps.